Hello and welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei. I'm so excited to paint with you today. We are going to be, or I'm going to be using inspiration from my recent trip to the UK where I got to spend time in London, Manchester, and the Lake District. And I had the opportunity to paint and draw lots and lots of inspiration from those three areas. Very urban settings, small city, town, and English countryside, which were it was just a magical, wonderful experience. My first time abroad over in Europe. So I was really excited to do that and to be able to bring back a bunch of inspiration for several classes and several videos that I'm going to be releasing. So we're going to start first with this window box. I really love so many buildings with beautiful architecture, had these gorgeous window boxes with flowers kind of cascading over them. And this was a little window in the side of a building in the Lake District in the city of, or the town of Windermere. So highly recommend Windermere. It's one of the most accessible as well as pretty popular towns in the Lake District. So I highly recommend it, but this was just a little scene of a window in that area. So we're going to get started and let's just go over a few supplies. So I have my outline on here already. So basically I just created a square, rectangle, put in my panes, and then I drew out kind of a rough outline of where those flowers will be in front of that, and then erased all of the window lines behind that. And of course I have a nice light outline. So I'm going to be using Winsor & Newton paints today instead of my core palette. This is going to include, let's see, we're definitely using some sap green, some phthalo blue, and a little ultramarine. And I'm also going to be using purple lake as my and pink color, as well as permanent rose, which I'm going to have to add a little bit more permanent rose to that. Actually, this is permanent rose as well. So those are the colors we're going to be using to get all of the beautiful colors in this little window box. I'm also going to be using some smaller brushes. I'm going to be using two size 4s. One is a size 4 round and one is a size 4 square or flat brush for my window pane and the glass, or the window pane and the window sill, and the round brush for all of the flower details. We also have our water and paper towel, and I guess we're ready to go. Oh, the paper I'm using, this is actually a pad of paper I got over in England at this amazing art store in Manchester. It was huge, but I'm using Bockingford cold press, 140-pound cold press. I know Bockingford is a favorite of Paul Clark, who's over there. I did try to figure out if I could get to one of his classes while I was over there, but unfortunately the timing didn't work out for where I was in the country. So let's get started and get your supplies together, and here we go. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna paint the windowsill, but I have to mix up some color. I'm gonna start with my phthalo blue, and I'm looking to get this really light kind of greenish blue color. So to this phthalo blue, I'm gonna add a little bit of my sap green until I see kind of that aqua color that I want. And then I'm going to add a lot of water. So phthalo blue and sap green until you're happy with it. And then a lot of water to get that nice light shade. Now you can definitely add, in my sample here, this one I did paint while I was over in the UK. I did add pen and ink, or ink to this with a pen. You can definitely do that, but you don't have to. I'm not going to add it to this one over here. I'm going to start by painting in, I'm going to start with my flat brush. So used to picking up the round. I'm going to start by just gently adding a layer of color to my window pane. and just avoiding the areas where there are flowers in front of it. I'm gonna use a little water. Now these window panes and window sills, often they were freshly painted, but they were old, so they had lots of divots and cracks and texture and character to them. So don't worry about it being perfectly smooth. I'm just gonna paint this in, first layer. So you can always go in and add, I'm gonna just make up some more of that color. Ooh, I went really green this time. You can go a little darker, but you can always add a little bit more of that color in to some areas to give it a little bit of texture. And as you can see here, I've added some darker color kind of along these edges here, and it looks like some light is kind of spilling this way, and there's a little bit of a shadow under there. So go ahead and play with your shadows. You can make a nice flat wash as well, but I like to give it a little bit of depth that way. All right, so now let's think about our window. Now the window it's dark inside, it's light outside, so it's gonna be a darker pane of window, but it's gonna have a little reflection on it. So I'm gonna take this same green here. I'm gonna go ahead and add some of this spring lake color here. And we're gonna start to gray this out. So green, which is a very blue green, and magenta will make a gray color. So I'm just adding magenta to this already existing color. So now I have a much grayer color, which I'm going to use for my window panes. Now I'm going to paint these in, but I'm definitely gonna leave some areas much lighter. I'm gonna add water, and these are gonna be reflections. Now you don't have to paint in a very specific reflection. We're being very loose with this. I'm gonna paint between some of these flowers, being careful to leave that space because those are going to be kind of light pink flowers there. So I wanna be careful. All right, our window pane is painted and we're gonna let it dry. We'll see if we need to add anything else to it later on. And now we're gonna start to tackle some of our flowers in our window box. And how I'm gonna start is I'm gonna start in the center with most of the green areas, skipping around the areas I wanna leave for flowers. So I have some purples in there and some pinks that I'm gonna leave blank edges for. And I have very light outlines on here. So these are all pinks up here. This is gonna be a big thing of green with a few little pinks, purple down here with a few pinks over here. So just keeping that in mind, it does not have to be perfect. You can kind of do your own version of it. You don't have to follow mine exactly. Kind of put your flowers wherever you want, but we have a couple variations in values. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my Cotman, my Winsor & Newton, actually this is Winsor & Newton Permanent Sap Green. It's from the professional line, but Cotman is very similar. This one's just a little bit more pigmented. Winsor & Newton Sap Green is not my favorite. It's a little too vibrant for me. I like it to be a little bit more muted, a little bit more of an olive tone. So how I do that is I just take some of the permanent rose and add it right to it, and then I have a more olivey green color. See how it desaturates that a little bit? All right, so I'm just gonna start by adding kind of a washy layer, textured layer of green throughout, skipping my areas. This doesn't have to be the darkest it's going to be. We're gonna add a couple layers of darker green on top of it, but these are gonna be the highlights in the green. So again, leaving some space for my pinks and purples. This is gonna travel with a nice, I love their boxes because they don't just have flowers that go up, they come out, they come down. Lots of hanging viney type flowers, which I love. Lots of different sprays, you know, they make them really beautiful. Some of them are, you know, I was there in the summer, so some of the, unfortunately during a heat wave when I was in London, but some of them are real flowers, but then you can tell some of them are fake, but they're very beautiful, nice fake flowers. I'm assuming so they don't have to worry about droughts and heat waves and things like that, and they can just, those were mostly with businesses so that they could just concentrate, I think, more on their business and have a beautiful aesthetic. But a lot of the home ones, the ones on people's houses, were real flowers. All right, so I'm just dropping in some more color, pick up a little more green, a little more magenta. Just drop in a few areas while this is still wet. And we'll come back and add some even darker color. That was a very brown, olivey green color. I'm gonna add some more green on top of that. So purple there. These are all pinks up here. A few little pinks in here. So there, we have the basis for our green. We're gonna save these kind of for last, and I can even put in those stems last. All right, so let's move on to our purples and then our pinks. So the flowers are really simple. I'm gonna mix up some, actually no, I'm gonna use some ultramarine and some of my permanent rose to make my purple. You could use cobalt for sure too, if you didn't want to use ultramarine. Ultramarine separates a little bit, but it makes a pretty saturated, beautiful purple. All right, so I have my purple. Again, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna create a stippled kind of filling in with various shades of this purple. So some of it's gonna be lighter, some of it's gonna be darker. I'm gonna do this a few times. I'm not trying to recreate these flowers exactly. I'm just making an impressionistic texture of these clumps, these groups of flowers here from the photo. Oh, and I will put the photo up in the video so you can see the reference photo I am using instead of just the painting I used. Perfect. So that's my first round of purples. You know what? I'm just gonna throw a few in this light green little, you gotta be careful with purple and green just because when they mix together, they will start to desaturate each other as well a little bit. Perfect. Okay, now I'm gonna move on to my spring lake, or actually no, this is permanent rose. And I am gonna make a very light version of this, and I'm just gonna drop in, these are like carnation, pink carnations, I think, or begonias maybe, I'm not sure. It was from afar, this particular window box. So knowing that I'm gonna come in with some darker colors on the top layer, I'm just dabbing those pink colors in there. And then I'm gonna dab some pinks down in here. We'll put a few up at the top and off to the sides and down this little viney thing. There were like some bleeding hearts in there, something like that, that were like hanging down. There we go. All right, so there's the majority of my first layer of flowers, and now I'm gonna go back through gonna let all of this dry, or even as it's drying, maybe drop in a few other areas of color, but I'm gonna let it all dry and then add in deeper or darker shades of these same colors to all of the areas. And again, I am just making an impressionistic version. So some of these things, I'll be adding just lots of stippling and dots into these purple areas, into the pink areas. I'll be putting in some lines to create that wavy petal effect. In the greens, I'll be making some different shapes with some long swishes, as well as some big blobs, really, for lack of a better phrase, that simulate kind of wide-based leaves, and just really having fun with it and creating texture in there. That's all it is. It's a whole big blob of texture and color that translates to us that these are flowers. So I'm gonna get to that, you get to yours, and we'll see what we get in the end. Get to work. Now here we are, all of my flower textures are done. And you can see I added in some of these big swooping sprays that come out. Those weren't in the picture, but I added them. I did some lifting here in my purple kind of hydrangea type flowers over here, where I put in a lot of color and then I realized it was a little too dark. So I went in and I just lifted out with my brush. So that's something you can definitely try doing. Depending on the type of paper you're using and paints, this may be easier on certain surfaces than others, and you may get more lift. Now, I'm loving the flowers, but the window is paling in comparison, so I need to give it a little bit more structure since I'm not planning to add any pen and ink. Now, if I was planning to add pen and ink, I think it would hold up on its own with a little bit more structure, but I need to add some of that in with my brush. So I'm still using my round brush. So you want a brown brush with a nice sharp tip. And in some of the areas here, I'm using this darker gray color that I made for the windows, but I'm gonna add a little bit of that to my window pane. I'm gonna blend it out. And I'm just creating some dimension. So some shadowy areas, reinforcing the shape of this window. You can see I did a little splattering in the process, so I have some splatter marks, but that's okay. I love the effect that that adds. Now you have these areas where the window has a crease or a crack. I can still see my pencil line a bit through there. So I'm just gonna add some of this over there. And then I'm definitely gonna deepen this color underneath the flowers here. This is gonna be in shadow, so it should be much darker. I wanna make sure your flowers are pretty dry. For this, I'm gonna put some over here and over here too, but leave a little bit of the light areas so there's some contrast so you can see that that's in shadow. And then you could even put, with a very light gray color, let's see, let's neutralize this gray. It's a little bit blue. So let's add I'm gonna pick up just a little yellow. Now that wasn't part of our color palette, but yellow and some Spring Lake again, just to make a pretty neutral gray. Now, if you have a gray or a Payne's gray or something like that, you can just lighten it with a lot of water. And I'm just gonna give my wall that the window is on a little texture. So underneath the windowsill, of course, there will be a little bit of a shadow. And this was a white stucco wall, so we're not gonna get too much into creating that texture right now, very specifically, but we'll just add a little bit of texture to give the impression of a surface. Lots of water, a little bit of pigment, not doing a flat wash, letting it be textured. There we go. So now we can see our window kind of holds up a little bit better. I'm gonna add a little bit more to this side here. There we go. Perfect. All right, so we are done with our little English window box in the Lake District area in Windermere. Thank you for painting with me today, and keep your eye out for more English inspired or UK inspired paintings from my trip to England, as I kind of work my way through the different things that I saw there, from landscape to architecture to more window boxes, arches, and clock towers. There was a clock tower on every corner. So thank you so much for painting with me. It's always a pleasure. Don't forget to like, subscribe to this channel. It is always helpful. Save this video, share it with others, leave comments, and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy painting.